Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts in Edmonton for one last show. If you've been trying to access a government website today, you may have had some problems. Sites were down for all or part of the day in jurisdictions across the country. In the Yukon, the government is saying it was the target of a cyber attack. That attack took down the Yukon government's website and a number of internal systems. Officials say they don't believe there is any threat to the data of private citizens or government systems at this point. According to the Yukon government, the public side of its web services is back up and running right now, but there are other sites that are still down. The government of Nunavut has also confirmed its website is down, but has not said it was an attack. A spokesperson says they're still investigating. And in the NWT, the finance minister says the website was down for part of the day, but she didn't say why.
Office of the Chief Information Officer is involved in this one. There's been a number of sites across Canada that have had some interruptions today, but we are monitoring and actively involved and actively mitigating. So the site is operational now. Obviously that can change, but that's where, as has already been mentioned, other mitigations are to make phone calls and send emails. But for the moment, we are operational and trying to keep it that way. Thanks.
Not being able to access a government service website online is always a problem. And in the Northwest Territories, that is especially true right now, as people in the South Slave look to pre-register for government flights home. Because of these issues, the deadline for pre-registration has been extended, and officials are asking people to call or email to get on the list. Now, if you are planning to fly back to your community, pre-registration will be available until 10 o'clock tonight. And again, from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. tomorrow. So pre-registration now closes tomorrow at 5 p.m. for South Slave residents. To do that, you can call the number on your screen or email disasterassistance@gov.nt.ca. If you're planning on driving back, it is important to keep an eye on the roads always. Right now, Highway 2, 5, and 6 are all closed to the general public because, of course, the communities aren't open yet. Those highways are open to essential workers who have been approved to go back and local Fort Resolution residents, though that's all still subject to highway conditions. As well, Highway 1, 3, and 7 are open right now. Finally, when you do get home, the GNWT Health Department has a task for you if you use a holding tank for your drinking water. It wants residents to drain the water in the holding tank and request a refill. And it says you should flush all water lines with fresh water for 15 minutes. This applies to both commercial and private facilities. The Health Department says this is a precautionary measure. No one's gotten sick, but the water has been sitting unused for 4 weeks now. Now that Yellowknifers are returning home and services are returning with them, NWT food retailers say their previously barren shelves are stocked once more. And government programs are helping offset some of their additional costs. Natalie Pressman has that story.
Dave Diamond is the general manager of the Delaunay Co-op. He says his store's pretty much full now, but earlier this month,
milk has been in short supply, bread has been in short supply. My potato chip counter is empty. My fresh meat counter is empty. I ran out of cigarettes. I think I'm out of flour. My shelves are pretty empty.
During Yellowknife's evacuation, stores had to ship their freight all the way from Edmonton rather than Yellowknife. And for some grocers, that meant costs went up tenfold. Joe Yatkowski is the manager of Lutzelkay's Co-op.
If you took milk, which, normally it's $7 after Nutrition North, and you 10 times the freight rate if we had to pay the full $50,000 for a dash, it's going to be up in the $100 range. What mother can buy that for their baby?
To help, the federal government is temporarily boosting its Nutrition North subsidy, and the territorial government has partnered with food security charity Second Harvest. Second Harvest has gathered food from producers, processors, and manufacturers across Alberta, and it's donated about 10,000 pounds of food to 4 NWT communities. That food arrived earlier this week to Lutzelkay, Fort Resolution, Becheco, and Covell Lake. Those deliveries arrived Tuesday and Wednesday. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
It was a wet start to the day in the Northwest Territories capital when some much needed and much welcome rain fell. Environment Canada reported light rainfall for most of the morning, enough for it to linger on tree branches and form puddles. It made for a soggy start to the new school year as students in the NWT capital headed back to class today. That's a little more than 2 weeks later than expected. But it didn't dampen the enthusiasm of teachers and staff.
It's great to be getting back into routines. We're just super excited to welcome our kids back. It's long overdue. The rain today is ironic. We've been praying for this for a while, so it's so great. So the excitement at the beginning of the year, it just never gets old. I think all the schools have recognized that our staff has been under, everybody, the whole community has been under a lot of stress. And so what they've allowed to happen this week is staff to come back and get organized. So there's been not the same traditional kind of professional development taking place, and so I think there's a preparedness that is even more advanced than in previous years because teachers have had a chance to focus and sort of get back and take their time to get ready for the opening, you know?
It'll be nice in the next week to have everybody back in school because it's a community here and we really miss our community of Welladay. We call it #Welladay family.
I think everybody's excited and ready to be back, but getting back into the groove might take a bit. I think just reaching the starting point was a lot for a lot of people, and I'm there too. And as the year unfolds, we'll see.
A hearing on the proposed expansion of a Nunavut gold mine is underway in Rankin Inlet. The Meliadine gold mine, operated by Agnico Eagle, wants to expand. The company is proposing to add 11 wind turbines and dig further underground for gold. Gita Anuak is an elder from Rankin Inlet. She's attending the hearing. She says she's already seen the effects the mine has had on the land she grew up on.
It feels like what the mining camp is doing is wrecking up a lot of our land and making it, useless for us to camp out on.
Agnico Eagle says it has measures in place to protect the environment around the mine, and it says wind turbines would help reduce its use of diesel. The hearing runs until September 20th and includes a session to allow community members to comment and ask questions. The Iqaluit City Councillors are trying to stop illegal drugs from pouring into the community. They unanimously passed a motion at Tuesday's council meeting. They want the Nunavut and federal governments to address security gaps in air travel from Yellowknife and to speak to Canada Post and Airlines about increasing mail and cargo inspections. Deputy Mayor Kyle Shepard proposed the motion. He says he's concerned about the normalization of hard drug use.
Had several friends comment on how normalized cocaine has become in our community. It's spoken about in locker rooms and on the sidelines of the ball fields, as well as elsewhere in the community. It's just become normalized at our bars, and the amount of use currently happening is really quite scary.
Shepard says he is not calling for the RCMP to search people's mail. That recently happened in Arctic Bay, where packages were searched outside the post office. Shepard says that from June 25th to September 2nd, city first responders went to 16 drug and alcohol overdose calls. A fire has completely destroyed a brand new building in Iqaluit NWT. The Iqaluit Native Band Community Wellness Office burned to the ground on September 3rd, just 2 days after its grand opening. Ian McLeod lives behind the building. He shot this video. McLeod says he lost power, phone, and internet. His power is now back on, but he's still without telecommunications. The Iqaluit Band Office has not responded to questions about the future of the Wellness Office. In Whitehorse, the Canada Game Centre is getting some new art. The T'Anquatchon Council is collaborating with the City of Whitehorse and the youth of today's society to create a mural representing Indigenous culture. Organizers say it's an opportunity for youth to express themselves.
It's been a couple of years in the workings to get this mural completed, and now it's full-fledged, and that community involved. Their culture is being shown off, I guess. It's in a sense, but I think more it's a way for other citizens in Whitehorse to be able to connect to a First Nation that may not be in the limelight so much.
The T'Angkwachon Council consulted with youth about what they'd like to see in the mural. When it's done, it'll include flowers, a river, trees, and salmon inspired by Lake Labarge. Sanikiluaq has 2 new sports fields thanks to the work of local students in the hamlet. The community's mayor says the artificial turf fields were installed this summer. There's a soccer pitch and also a baseball diamond. This is a project that's been in the works for several years.
The summer students were helping out all during the summer when they were on their summer break from school. So we collected about 10 students and they helped out.
Katuk says anyone in the community is welcome to use the fields, and so far they're proving popular with the kids in Sanikiluaq. She says the community is planning to install benches around the fields as well.
When it comes to protecting the world's cuddliest creatures,
we just got a 911 on a bear in a hot tub.
You'll need animal control.
Did he turn the jets on?
Watch all episodes now.
We overspend and overcook, which is disastrous for our wallets and the planet.
That's a lot of waste.
Your job is to discover the mystery dessert.
What is it? What is it?
Raspberries.
Dark chocolate.
We're gonna win. Woo!
Can you imagine yourself traveling to have breakfast with giraffes or kayaking with whales? Wildlife viewing tourism is expanding rapidly around the world, and in the north, it's all about bears. Virginie Ann has this feature on bear tourism in the Yukon.
Bear viewing, it's either your biggest dream or biggest fear. For most people around the world, it's a rare privilege, a mix between magic and fright. In the Yukon, it's a normal, nonetheless startling Saturday afternoon. Bears are everywhere, and nearly all tourists want to spot them. While many places with similar ecosystems have banked on wildlife viewing as a form of tourism, the territory actually doesn't really offer such adventures. But why not? People want to view wildlife, but there's also a huge economic opportunity in doing so. There's actually a study that came out in 2014 about ecotourism in British Columbia. It says there's more money to be made by looking at bears than by shooting at them, 12 times more to be exact, according to the Center for Responsible Tourism. Backcountry tourism, including bear viewing, brings around $2 billion each year for both Alaska and BC, the Yukon's neighbors. So why aren't we tapping into this? Our first stop to answer this question is the government. The Yukon's Department of Tourism and Culture says wildlife viewing is the territory's #1 activity. But when you look at how it promotes tourism, it's all about open space, rivers, and mountains.
I can understand why you might be curious about that. Wildlife viewing is complicated. For some people, of course, they see it as an economic opportunity, a way to make money, but also it is viewed by others as something that could be invasive and actually sort of harm the wildlife. In the Yukon, we definitely prioritize sustainable tourism development. There's demand for this type of experience, and there's a ton of demand for wilderness-based experiences.
So what would be the next step for me to be able affordable to open and run that business in the Yukon?
So right now, there isn't a process or a way for a business to actually get land tenure unless you're a hunting outfitter or a trapper. Then you can get concessions and undertake that type of activity. But for the broader tourism sector, at this moment, there's not a place or a mechanism to enable that, but it is a work in progress right now.
Wait, that last bit of information is a bit puzzling. There's demand from tourists. Mining industry, hunting outfitters can obtain a license to operate. But when it comes to tourism, that type of license doesn't exist to develop out on the land. Marsh says it simply hasn't been a priority for the government. Here's one of the people that's been impacted by the lack of legislation around land and tourism.
Access to land is something that the Wilderness Tourism Association of the Yukon has been working on for probably 30 years now. We have members that have retired or sold their businesses. Sadly, we have some members that have passed away, waiting for an opportunity to have access to land.
Pallet spoke of some of the obstacles that make this a complicated subject, including the fact mining and hunting are deeply rooted in the Yukon's culture and priorities. But he says more access to the land for wildlife viewing doesn't have to mean less for these two sectors.
The land tenure piece is long and complicated. But we are a willing and engaged partner, and we definitely want to. We definitely understand that having access to land would create new opportunities, both for existing operators and potentially for new companies as well.
One of the existing operators that he's talking about is Phil Timpany. Timpany has been advocating for more backcountry tourism for years. He's actually the only person that's allowed to do bear viewing here in the Yukon. How? It all boils down to land claims. In 1995, when Vuntut Gwitchin First Nation settled its land claims in Old Crow, they set aside part of their land for the creation of a protected area and ecological reserve. One of the First Nation requirements in the management plan to include grizzly bear viewing for tourism opportunities. In the early 2000s, Timpany started to take tourists out to see bears at Bear Cave Mountain. This is his second bear viewing location south of Atlin, BC. And here, tucked into the forest with the Nakina River running through it, fear of the mystic grizzly makes room for curiosity.
I think the people that come here get to understand the nature of a bear. I think that people that don't participate in this kind of activity, they have their perception of the nature of grizzly bears is different than what it really is. Fear is, is running rampant in the Yukon. Fear of bears. Fear of bears is, there's a paranoia. Most people, I ask most guests how their experience was before they leave, either the morning they leave or the evening before. I ask a lot of them, how did you find the experience? And the most common word they use about the experience with the bears and the encounters with the bears, they're very surprised at how calming it is to them.
Timpany says both locations are booked up to 3 years in advance. Tourists are willing to each pay $7,500 for 6 nights with the bears.
The Yukon has huge potential for wildlife viewing, commercial wildlife viewing, huge potential. It's a shame that there isn't more value on a grizzly bear's life than there is in Yukon. It's really a shame that there's so many bears killed. 1,000 years ago in Yukon, the bears knew as much about the people as the people knew about the bears. And that's what made it all work. And we've taken that away. We don't allow the bear to get to know us. And here we allow them to get to know us. They know we're not threatening. So you build tolerance, you build knowledge, and you build respect and appreciation.
There's a lot more that needs to be done before this would work on a bigger scale, and many more discussion to be had on how it would work in harmony with land claims, mining industries, and hunters. But Timpany's story shows that there's a glimmer of hope that what the Yukon's neighbors have tapped into one day here could also be a reality. After all, the Yukon is so vast and has so much to offer. Virginie Anne, CBC News, Whitehorse.
You heard Virginia Ann there talk about Old Crow. We have another tourism story in Old Crow for you. The Flying Gwich'in community is the Yukon's most northern village. And there's one local family that's opening their doors to welcome visitors. The CBC's Cheryl Kawaja visited the Josie family this summer. As she shows us, they hope to offer more than just a tour and a place to sleep.
The latest batch of puppies at the Josie's house is pretty active. Some of them will become sled dogs and work in the family business doing tours with visitors.
It's a small community and visitors are always welcome. And that's something that I learned from my grandmother years ago. She always had tea or bannock to welcome people. And that's one of the things I want to carry on.
Paul Josie's grandmother was Edith Josie, a well-known Gwich'in writer and columnist. Josie's Old Crow Adventures has been operating as a year-round, all-inclusive wilderness tourism operation for almost a year now. Fully booked last winter with more than 100 guests, they say, and slower in the summer, but promising. Guests stay in Edith Josie's cabin, and they have a chance to spend time on the Porcupine River, visiting important sites to the Gwich'in, and in winter, dog sledding, fishing.
We try and really prep people for what it's going to be like. And we're like, the accommodations are really rustic. You're staying in a cabin. So we try and really prep them. We're driving on an ATV.
Culture is very important to the Josies. They speak Gwich'in at home with their children. And they hope their visitors will gain a deeper understanding of Gwich'in people and culture.
Like, we invite them into our home, we show them some of our sewing and beadwork and things that we have, and we're sharing our life, we're sharing our way of life with people. And people just really enjoy that kind of breath of fresh Old Crow air.
When they're up on the mountain, it's so quiet that they want to just take a moment to take it all in, because there's no sounds, no traffic, no nothing, and it's just silence. And that's what they just want to take a moment and take that in. That's what always catches me. And I just sit back and just wait. Let them have the moment. Let them listen to the birds, or else just the quiet. In the winter, it's just quiet.
It's shoulder season now, but the Josies are already gearing up for what they hope will be a second bumper winter season. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Old Crow, Yukon.
In Halifax, officials are looking at something new in the fight against climate change and giving the city's harbour a giant dose of antacid. Paul Withers explains.
This is the outfall of the Nova Scotia power plant at Tufts Cove in Dartmouth. This week it's the scene of a trial to add tons of antacid to Halifax harbour to see if that will help remove carbon from the atmosphere. The most visible element in the experiment, the release of pink dye to track how the antacid is likely to spread in Halifax harbour. Unseen but more important, 15 tons of magnesium hydroxide, a benign alkaline often used in wastewater treatment, released in a slurry of seawater.
You can kind of think of it as a sponge. By making the ocean less acidic, you're increasing the size of that sponge. And so its natural ability to take CO2 out of the air, which it's doing all the time, that capacity grows as you make it more alkaline.
The company is responsible for the dosing trials. Part of that is to ensure it has no negative environmental effects.
A critical part of our regulatory compliance is to have a close eye on the receiving waters. We need to know exactly what the chemical composition of this water is, especially the pH, the acidity level, and the amount of suspended solids. So we keep a close eye on that here with this meter, as well as in here. A series of pumps and instruments that is continuously taking measurements.
Will Burt says this is groundbreaking research not being carried out on this scale anywhere else, with a big upside if successful.
5 years' time, we could be removing enough carbon at this very site to make a dent in our provincial emissions portfolio. So there's a really big opportunity here to make a real impact.
The dosing project is being assessed for its effectiveness by researchers at Dalhousie, who are comparing real results with models like this.
Right, we don't have a vested interest in the outcome, and our role specifically is to
verify that CO2 is indeed taken up and stored in the ocean, and develop ways to quantify it accurately.
The challenge, she says, measuring appreciable change when background levels in the ocean are already very high and variable. More trials are planned at this site in the months and years ahead. Researchers hope to have a better idea if it's working in a year or so. Paul Withers, CBC News, Dartmouth.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. This was our last night working from Edmonton. Tomorrow, Leanie Lambrink will be with you from Yellowknife. We'd like to thank all of our Edmonton colleagues for their help and their support. It's been huge to have while we're here. And a special shout out to Scott Neufeld, Richard Marion, and David McFarlane. They are the ones behind the camera who are making sure that we can get to air every day. The next time you'll see me, I'll be in Yellowknife. I am so looking forward to it. I really can't wait to be home. Until then, thank you for watching. Masicho, nakomi. We'll leave you with a look at Fort Providence and the mighty Mackenzie River as captured by CBC drone operator Travis Burke. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.